Hello all, this is Dr. Dave Maslak, and I'm going to talk to you about reciprocity.com. The E is spelled with a 3. And what it is a platform where you can get feedback, because I really want you to write better and be much more of a prolific writer. So in this particular video, I really am talking about graduate students and how you become a better graduate student and write a lot more as a graduate student. So this is part of my Thesis Help series. I put it out every Friday. And I really like this kind of stuff because I myself am a professor of innovation, and I really want you to excel at graduate school. It's the reason why I actually created Reciprocity, was to help myself excel so I can become a more prolific writer and I can get feedback on the stuff that I write, because I feel very anxious all the time about the stuff I write and I don't know if it's any good. In fact, probably most of the time it's terrible. So if I can get feedback, it's great to get that feedback. So in this particular video, I really wanted to talk about whether you should actually focus when you're in grad school on doing only high quality publications and high quality work. Now, this is framed around, and this particular video is really just for graduate students and those that are interested in doing research and all that kind of stuff. And what I am going to borrow from is in the innovation literature. It's actually from organizational theory, but in the innovation literature, there is this trade-off that we often talk about when you do innovative products or innovation projects, right? So this is what maybe like a 3M or a Google would sort of think about, these sort of large companies think about, is they often do a trade-off between the projects that they do that have very high impact and can be sort of revolutionary, compared to the ones that are sort of more incremental and they don't necessarily make as big of an impact with the stuff that they do. It's kind of generational stuff, right? Generational products or innovations. And what this trade-off is actually called the exploitation trade-off. Look at Jim March's work for that. I really like the stuff that he does. I'm a big fan of the stuff he does. But in this particular video, and what I'm going to use this for, is this explanation of whether you should, as a graduate student, whether you should actually do a lot more of this sort of exploratory stuff. So what is an exploratory project? This is ones that are very high risk. This involves a lot of exploration. This involves a lot of experimentation, going into an unknown area that a lot of people haven't gone into. What the benefit is when you go into these unknown areas, it's very uncertain, right? But it is often you have a lot of uncertainty. Wherever there's uncertainty is the areas where you can profit, in the areas that nobody else has done, and you can gain a lot from going into those areas, right? So profiting in our context is actually becoming a more well-known researcher, right? So more people start reading your stuff and are interested in it because you're making these really interesting insights. Now, the exploitative kind of projects, these are the ones that are kind of incremental, they're generational. These are things that you don't necessarily have to think about nearly as much. They're kind of quick wins, right? We often hear about these quick wins. Those are the things that are really easy to do, and they're just kind of incremental, but people need to get them done, right? So there's this trade-off that we as researchers often face, and we as in, big universities and big research institutes often face, is the trade-off between doing the more sort of risky, really exploratory stuff that nobody else has done versus the sort of incremental stuff that we're just kind of building on top of what other people have done. You could think of kind of a close analogy. It's not quite perfect, but close of it is kind of like applied research that has a lot of commercial applications compared to ones that are more theoretical, and we don't know what the applications are in any sort of way, right? So it's a trade-off like that, and that's what we're thinking about. And you have to make the change, you have to make a balance. So the reason why it's difficult to make this particular balance is that they're often competing goals, and they both require a tremendous amount of effort to do them. On the incremental side, you have to produce a lot of them in order to become successful, right? You have to write a lot of articles to actually become successful if you're doing incremental stuff. Versus on the other side, it takes a lot. Exploratory stuff takes a lot of thought, and it's really hard to do. But you often get like a large win that people pay attention to, right? That is really, really cool, and everybody all of a sudden starts paying attention to it. The problem is that it's kind of really episodical, that it doesn't happen all the time, and it's extremely rare events. Whereas on the other side, when you're doing the exploitative stuff, it happens on a regular basis, and you're just kind of building this nice critique, this nice sort of vita. There's a great video, and it's The Beautiful Mind. If you've ever seen it, it actually goes through sort of this trade-off with the exploitative sort of style of, producing a lot of research and having a nice CV versus the explorative, where somebody just makes one sort of breakthrough innovation that completely changes everything, but it's just one paper. It's one sort of small thing that people are like, well, what's the big deal, right? But it's a huge impact. It makes a huge impact, right? So you're often making these trade-offs, and the risk is, and it actually plays it really nicely in The Beautiful Mind, that movie, right? So, And the risk is that if you're not producing enough, you could be selected out of the market, right? So you have to figure out how to balance those two. This is actually called ambidexterity, believe it or not, when you balance those two things and you balance them well. And the way that you do that is you might have different sort of research teams, one that is focused on more exploitative stuff, and then you work occasionally, or your big project that you're working on is the sort of big thing. And what you can actually do too is frame your research projects and the stuff that you do is chasing after this really big goal of whatever it is, and you're chasing after it, and then every once in a while you kind of slice off something that's really small and incremental, but you're still chasing after this bigger thing, right? So you're always constantly going towards this bigger thing, but then as well producing at a slower rate, mind you, compared to actually producing more incremental stuff. Because it takes a lot of time to think about these bigger things, but you can slice off every once in a while, maybe do a empirical contribution of some sort, or maybe you come up with a new sort of methodology, but you're still going towards a sort of bigger goal of actually this exploratory stuff. And that's how you might balance those two a little bit. It's still really tricky, and there is a lot of people. The one thing that you'll know in graduate school, in academia, is there's a lot of selection that happens. Selection being that people exit out of the market because it's really tough to continue on. I myself I have no idea whether I can actually persist in this a long time, but I really like it, and it's my calling. But at the same time, I do realize that there's a lot of selection effects that happen along the way. You do get selected out of the market. It can be done. So that's all I wanted to say, is that what you should think about is, rather than going after the bigger things, but try to actually create a portfolio. And this is actually called an innovation map or a portfolio. And this is what, like, say 3M would do, is they would have a map, right? An actual map, and they'd have the products on the map where they'd sort of detail how incremental it is versus ones that are a lot more breakthrough. And you can also, what's called a platform strategy, is you can actually create some sort of platform where you're sort of building off of that platform and creating sort of incremental projects from that, but moving towards this bigger goal where you're actually solving a bigger problem along the way. And it's a really nice way to think about it, and that's where large companies actually think about their own research and development, and you can apply it to yourself in graduate school as well to be able to balance those two, right? But in graduate school, when you're starting out, you should definitely focus and pick a project and continue to work on that for a couple of years. That's going to benefit you tremendously. Maybe your graduate advisor or supervisor helps you out and picks that project so you can work on that, and it's going to be an effective one. But that's going to get you going in the right direction. And after a couple of years, maybe after 3 years, for example, you're going to start to figure out these sort of derivatives from that. And it's going to become easier for you to get these derivatives and sort of launch in those in more incremental ways. But definitely focusing on a bigger project at the beginning, at least for a couple of years, is going to get you further along than doing sort of incremental things at the beginning. And I just would recommend that. That's my own personal advice. So that's all I wanted to say. If you like these thesis advice or thesis help videos. You could check out the other ones every Friday. I do put them out. You also look at the other videos I do put out. I'm trying to actually create this platform. Again, it's to get feedback for writers to make them become more prolific and to reduce the anxiety that you do feel, right, when you are getting your own work evaluated and stuff like that. So I'm trying to create this platform where I'm able to do that. If it ever becomes profitable, I'd really love to be able to give back to graduate students and create behavioral science scholarships and things that are really fun and interesting that I can actually give back. So with that, have a good day, take care, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye.